Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today I'm going to talk about the dangers of nostalgia. Because I believe we have now gotten to that point that I have been warning about on my channel for the last 4 or 5 years, wherein your quote unquote progressive entertainment has started to fail. And so these quote unquote progressive entertainment systems are retreating into nostalgia in order to try to appear to a normal audience to be the good guys. And so go back to subtly selling the exact same message they've been pushing overtly for the last 15 years. And this is a subject which is actually quite near and dear to my heart. Why? Because it is sort of the way that I create stories myself. If you know anything about my graphic novels, and if you want to go and look at them, there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels. What I did with these characters and worlds that I built was very much like the old 1990s amalgam comics, which were a joining together of Marvel and DC heroes, which is something that is part of this nostalgia bait right now, but I'll get to that in a minute. But the point is, I grew up loving Marvel and DC comics, Marvel and DC heroes, and I always wanted to write them. But I knew by the time I got to write my graphic novel, that was never going to happen, A, and B, would I even want to write them anymore? Because these characters have been destroyed within Marvel and DC. So I decided to take a, as I would call it, amalgam approach. I would take one Marvel hero and one DC hero, and I would smush them together, usually with a third element introduced as well. Something like an anime character or a D&D monster or a video game villain that would give these characters that I am creating and that you see in my books that you're looking at in the background, by the way, a very familiar visual feel so that I didn't have to explain the entire backstory of these characters because it's already cemented in the mind of the reader through pop culture what kind of a character they are. And so I can just start page 1 with action and tell the story of who these characters actually are as differentiated from the Marvel and DC heroes through that action. And that's how I tell a story. But my point in doing that is to, at the first, visually bring the reader back to not nostalgia, but to a point where they looked at these heroes as actually heroic. Because that's the thing I want to conserve. That's the thing I want to preserve. That's the thing I want to create new stories with and bring into the future. It's that idea of a hero, the true heroism that these characters embodied at one point. That is the connection point of the visual that I then use to build up characters that are heroic. And I do mean build them up. My main character is someone who believed he was always a hero, but then on examining his actions has found out that he's really not the hero he thought he was. And even now trying to be a hero, he's still not the hero he wants to be. And so it is the building up, the rebuilding up of this idea of heroism. And that's what my stories are all centered around. But again, it goes back to this amalgam type feel of smushing these things together to give that visual cue, that visual head start, and then bring it back to something real. But the exact opposite thing is happening within the nostalgia bait that you see right now coming out of quote unquote progressive entertainment. And yes, over the last week, Marvel and DC have just announced that they're going to re-establish the amalgam universe, where they take Marvel and DC characters and smush them together. They're trying to bring people back to that nostalgia of the mid-90s, to try to bring people back to reading comics because they've destroyed the companies of Marvel and DC with their quote unquote progressive political agenda so much. But again, this is just a bait and switch. This is just them saying, you see, we can still make good comics. We could go back to that old nostalgia that you love. See, we can do this and you can come back and read them. And oh, by the way, there's still some progressive politics in the background, but don't mind that. So again, the point is, they're trying to subtly insert their political agenda in once again, instead of overtly doing it. Now, is there evidence for them doing this in this new amalgam universe that they're going to create? Well, not yet, but I'm going to stay on top of that one. But there is in other avenues, and I'll go over those right now. First off, let's look at some of the Star Wars stuff that I've been talking about over the last couple of months. What is the statements that are coming out from Bob Iger and the supposed director of the new franchise movies and other people within the Disney entertainment system saying? They're saying, we're going to break completely from the ideas and the characters of George Lucas, and give you a new, quote unquote, female led Star Wars universe. It's going to be heavily invested in this, quote unquote, progressive political agenda, but we're going to call our main character Rey Skywalker. This is the exact same thing that I've just been talking about. They want to play off of the nostalgia of that Skywalker name while trying to insert something completely new. Now, they have had severe backlash in stating that, but I think it's a severe backlash in stating that so overtly. And what you're going to see moving forward is them making statements covertly or not at all, just simply inserting agenda into things. And there's an example of that from the last week. If anything can be claimed to be nostalgia bait, it is the new upcoming X-Men 97 animated series that is coming out. They're trying to revamp the X-Men animated series, which was so popular back in, I guess, 97. There was a one-shot of the animated series much earlier than that. But anyway, the point is that they put out some promotional material for this new series called X-Men 97, again, nostalgia bait, and it looks like the old X-Men animated series, and the characters more or less look the same and seem to act the same. People were getting a bit hyped for this new series, and then over the last week, they subtly put out a tweet saying, oh, by the way, one of the characters, he's non-binary. But the thing is, again, a lot of people are looking at this and going, okay, I see what you're doing. So you're using nostalgia to draw me in so that I actually watch your series, but you're still going to hand me the same underhanded crap of progressive politics that you've been shoving into everything for the last little while. You're just not telling us right off the bat. Well, yes, that's exactly what they're going to do. Because, well, here's the point. And I'll get into this before I go back to examples. But the point that I've been pushing on my channel, again, as I said, for the last 4 or 5 years minimum, is the fact that they're retreating into nostalgia because why? Because, and this is my thesis, and as someone who studied political theory, concentrating on the origin of ideas and how they carry through time, it is my estimation that the 70s, 80s, and 90s minimum, going back to the 70s, but the 70s, 80s, and 90s didn't accidentally lead to where we are right now. There is no other path that we could have chosen besides where we are right now from the ideas that were introduced and pushed over the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The only way we could have averted being where we are right now is to do an entire 180 and have gone in the opposite direction at some point in time. But of course, that didn't happen. And so, again, the 70s, 80s, and 90s didn't accidentally lead to where we are, where we started to be in the early 2000s, in the 2010s, and now in the 2020s, with this quote-unquote progressive political agenda being run through everything. No, it deliberately led us to where we are right now. So the point is, for them to use nostalgia is for them to basically say, we're going to go back to the last good save point of when we were in control. Why? Because to the normal public, they will say to themselves, we don't think that the 70s, 80s, and 90s led us to where we are right now. We see the 70s, 80s, or 90s as when things were quote-unquote normal. And so if you bring us back to normal, and again, they're trying to use the 90s right now as that nostalgia normal. If you bring us back to normal, we will simply go back to being happy cows and just lapping up whatever it is you give to us. Whereas the people on the quote-unquote progressive entertainment side will say, no, we're going back to that point because we know that it will lead exactly back to where we are right now, but we now have more information of what to do and what not to do next time we get to this point. So again, what they're trying to do in video game terms is go back to that last good save point because they have additional knowledge, but we're the unchanging, unthinking boss monster at the end of this entire thing. We don't change because we've been lulled into a false sense of security, thinking that going back to the 90s will actually make things normal. And since we don't change, but they have additional knowledge, they will then defeat us the next time we go back to this exact same point, which is inevitable. And if it doesn't work next time, they'll go back to the last good save point again and do it again and again and again, just like a video game. That's the intent of this entire thing. That is the intent of nostalgia bait. And let's just look at some events, some recent history, and some things going on right now that show this is exactly what they're doing and have done in the past. Because again, the point is that quote unquote progressive entertainment is failing right now. So let's go back to the last time they actually received quite a blow, and that would be 2016. Because prior to that, they thought, yeah, we're in control. Everything is ours. We're just going to progress into the future. This progressive future is just going to happen. And then 2016 happened. And they realized that they weren't as much in control as they thought. And there was an article that I covered in, I think it was 2018, that it was published by the New York Times, an article with G. Willow Wilson, the co creator of Miss Marvel, where she said openly that when she first became a writer, it was to quote unquote change the world. Again, see, make the world more progressive. But when the 2016 election happened and Donald Trump got into the White House, she switched gears so that she became quite specifically a political actor with her writing in order to, in her words, provide a bulwark, a safe point of retreat for progressive leaders so that once they regained control, they could move from that point of what she calls a point of refueling, of getting hope fuel, that she says. And then again, once they regain control, they can move from this safe point back out into the world and retake any territory that had been lost. That was her specific statement to the New York Times. Do you think any of that has changed? Do you think any of that is going to change now that they're in this retreat point once again? No, this is exactly what they're trying to do. But that retreat point has now become nostalgia. Let me give you an older example to go back to my statements that the 70s, 80s, and 90s directly led us to this point. I covered an interview with a woman called Bobby Chase. This was a Marvel.com interview with the Women of Marvel. They were lauding Bobby Chase as one of the progressive forerunners that has brought the Marvel Universe into this progressive utopia that they had in 2021, I do believe the interview was. Anyways, Bobby Chase was one of the editors-in-chief of Marvel Comics within the mid to late 90s. And again, these are her words. She says that when she got into Marvel Comics, she was just looking for a job. I do believe it was the very early 90s or late 80s that she got there and just interviewed for a job. And she was told, again, her words, she was told at that time to take her East Coast political sensibilities and to check them at the door if she wanted to work for Marvel Comics, because the majority of the people who buy Marvel Comics did not share that political view. And what did she do? Well, she says she nodded her head, saying yes, yes, and then went straight to work after getting the job, subverting that exact thing until she got into the position to be a high-ranking editor at Marvel, and she started to introduce these progressive political statements into the storylines of Marvel Comics. And then again, that leads us to her being lauded a couple of years ago as one of the forerunners of the people who brought about the new progressive Marvel. And why did she do this? Why did she go to work straight away, subverting the entire process of checking her politics at the door when she worked for Marvel Comics? Well, she says she did it because that's what she was taught to do by her parents. She relates the story in that interview that her parents were heavy progressive political actors, by the way, members of the Democratic Party, and whenever they would move to a new area, they would join the Republican Party. Why? Because they would convince everyone that they knew and everyone around them that they were Republican, join the Republican Party, try to get some position within the party in that area so that they could deliberately subvert the processes of the Republican Party in that area, because that's what you do as a progressive political actor. So yeah, that's what her parents were doing in the 70s and 80s. That's what her parents taught her to do as she grew up. And so when she got her job within Marvel within the late 80s, early 90s, that's exactly what she set about to do. That's what she did by the mid 90s. And when she was in control as part of the editors-in-chiefs of Marvel Comics in the late 90s, she brought about what we see today within Marvel Comics, the quote-unquote progressive agenda dripping off of everything. So yes, this agenda was there for a long time. And that's exactly what they want to bring us back to with this nostalgia. To bring us back to the point where you don't know this is what they're doing, but this is what they're doing. Now let's move all the way forward to statements made by Bob Iger, the controlling CEO of Disney Entertainment right now, the entire Disney company actually, and of course Marvel Comics and everything that have to do with Marvel. What has he been saying over the last year or so? He's been saying, as I've covered in a number of videos over the last couple of months, that it's all about branding, that he needs to have the entire company leverage their branding in order to sell entertainment. What does that mean? Well, that means you don't have to provide a better entertainment product. You just have to make sure that the general public recognizes your brand enough so that when they are given a choice between entertainment, they choose your brand. That's it. That's how you leverage branding. And why do they want to do it this way? Well, because they want to insert their quote-unquote progressive political agenda into the entertainment. So it's not about making better entertainment, it's about selling a message. And we know this exact thing because there was just over the last week a new video released of Bob Iger stating back in 2017, right after the so-called insurrection, that it was Disney's job to actually call this stuff out because it's not being political, in his words, it's just being a good company. And so it's their job to oppose things like the so-called insurrection. This is what their entertainment is based off of. And why do they think they could do that? Well, again, because they don't need to give you better entertainment, they just need to leverage their branding better. And let's take one step even up from that, because a lot of people in my comment section are saying, well, it's because these companies are run by ESG social credit scores, with companies like BlackRock and the rest actually funneling them money because they have a good ESG score, which is code word for they're heavily progressive. Let's enter that into the picture, because what has been happening over the last couple of months in the last Davos summit of the World Economic Forum, well, the entire thing was about what? It was about regaining the trust of the public because they realized they've lost the trust of the public. And how did they say they were going to regain this trust from the public? What is their agenda? Because that's what they call it. They call it agenda setting. What is their agenda for the future? Is it to be more open? Is it to be more honest? Is it to listen to the people and actually give them what they want? No. The conclusion that they've come to is what they need to do is simply rebrand. And so for something like the ESG scores, this social credit system that they want to set up, since people know what it is now and they don't like it, they're not going to get rid of it. They're simply going to call it something else and just rebrand the entire thing so that people don't know what they're doing. So what's the point of going over this seemingly random list of things that might be connected? Well, the point is they are connected. How? Because if you have everyone from the World Economic Forum, which at the very least you can see as a thought leader, a think tank thought leader for your progressive ideological push, if you have thought leaders and somebody like Bob Iger, which is the leader of an industry, and you have people in control of companies, as that discussion between Bobby Chase and it was Sana Amanat, leaders of the company in their respective times, to creatives like G. Will Wilson saying we need to retreat to this safe point, to the products themselves like X-Men 97, you see that on every level, they're doing the same thing. On every level, they're still pushing forward with their progressive agenda. They simply want to return to a point in time where people didn't know what they were doing. And that's what nostalgia is for. Or I should say, that is what their use of nostalgia right now is for. And that's why you're going to see it more and more in your entertainment as we move forward. It isn't to give you the things that you want. It isn't to go back to merit-based entertainment. It's simply to lull you and everyone else into a false sense of security so that when we inevitably get back to the point where their progressive agenda is in control of almost everything, they know exactly what to do and what not to do in order to win the next time. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. And don't forget, there are 2 links in the description and on the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels. Stories that center around the idea of true heroism, going back to merit-based storytelling and art, and some of that spectacular art you're looking at in the background. So if any of that looks or sounds appealing to you at all, click on one of those links in the description or the pinned comment and order yourself a copy of one of my graphic novels today. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.